Hi there, it's Steven, and I've got a helpful tip for you today, or I think it's helpful for when you're building and configuring things in Onspring when you need to, particularly when you need to perform some sort of calculation, something like a sum or a count. Um, and when you need to do this sum or count based on multiple criteria, right? So if you're from the land of spreadsheets, then you're probably familiar with things like CountIfs or SumIfs methods or functions that allow you to basically say, hey, give me a sum of this, but only if it meets these two criteria, or give me a count of this if it only meets these three criteria. And this is a need that exists for people who build in Onspring as well. It existed for me, but might not always be kind of relatively straightforward of how you go about accomplishing this in Onspring with a different set of tools. Especially if you come from, like I said, spreadsheet land where you're used to kind of doing things a certain way and thinking about things a certain way. So I've got kind of a simplified use case to kind of demonstrate how I go about solving this particular problem and how you could go about solving this particular problem, and hopefully it'll make your life a little bit easier down the road. So you'll see here what I've got going on is I've got this parent record that is a project record, and this project record can have a number of tasks that are related to it. And it could have one task or related, or it could have 100 tasks related. And so what I've decided is, well, let's get some formulas going to where I can have some kind of very simple metrics, but metrics that at a glance give me a very quick idea of where the project sits in terms of its status or its activity. And so I've kind of started to build out those formula fields. You'll see here I've got this total tasks count formula field, which is just looking at that task reference field and telling me how many related tasks are there. But you'll notice each one of my task records in this reference field can have a particular status value, in progress or complete. And so I want to break down that total task count a little and make it a little bit more granular and say, give me the number of tasks that are related to this project that are in progress, and give me the number of tasks that are related to this project that are complete. And you'll see I've started to do that over here on the right hand side, where I've got this total in progress tasks field and a total complete tasks field. So now I'm basing my count not just purely on how many tasks are in that reference field, but I'm also saying what is the particular status of that record, and if that particular status is the status I care about, in progress or complete, then count it. And then you'll also notice each one of my task records can also have a type. So if we look here, each one of those task records can have a type of incidental, coordinated, or planned. And so I also want some counts that tell me, well, how many incidental tasks are related to this project record. Is this project something that has a lot of spontaneous things pop up, or is this project pretty planned, or does this project require a lot of coordination amongst a lot of resources? And so I've started to build those count fields as well. If you look over here, I've got my tasks that are incidental count, which is returning 1 because I only have one related incidental task. But now this is where we kind of come up against this problem where, okay, I've got this count of incidental tasks, but I want to further subdivide that now. I don't just want the count of incidental tasks. I want to know how many of those incidental tasks are complete, how many of those incidental tasks are in progress. So now this is where I've reached this point where my count is based on more than one criteria. And so I've started to try to build those formula fields out here where I'm trying to get a count of in progress tasks that are of the incidental type, but they also have that status of in progress as well. And I'm doing that for the complete task as well. So see, these fields are the fields that I need to be able to have a count that's based on multiple criteria, the status criteria and the type criteria. And so let me show you how I've kind of accomplished this with just a single criteria first, so that we can kind of explore how we can leverage that to do it to also count based on multiple criteria. So let me go ahead and erase all this, and then get out of drawing mode here real quick. And let's open the layout here, and let's take a look at the total in progress task formula field really quick, just so you can see what I'm doing here. So in this case, I'm using the built-in Onspring function, CountIf, and that's going to allow me to decide, hey, I want to base this count off a particular condition. So in this case, I'm saying, hey Onspring, look at all the related task records, specifically look at their status value, check to see if that status value is equal to in progress, and if it is, I want you to count its record ID. That way I can get ultimately a count of the number of in progress tasks. But for those new formula fields I made, I also need to have a second criteria here that's going to say, hey, Onspring, not only look at the task's status value, but also look at the task type value to determine whether or not you should count the record. And so if we look at the documentation for the CountIf function, we're going to see that this function really is only intended to be used with a single criteria. So if you read through here, you'll kind of get that gist, even just the brief description. The CountIf formula function counts the number of records in a related app or survey that meets a specific criterion, meaning an individual criteria. And you can see in all the examples use a single criteria to determine the count. So we've got finding status complete, controls compliance status not tested, or a particular value of a contract record, but nothing is using multiple criteria. And so now this is where you as an admin or even I as an admin would be, so how do I do this then? If I don't have a CountIfs function, if I don't have a SumIfs function, what do I do? And the answer to that is to be a little creative, or really just kind of think about this in a different way, is that what we can do is we can move our criteria down to these child task records, right? So we can allow the task records to decide, am I in progress and am I incidental, right? So we can use a second formula field at the child level to determine, hey, or the task record to determine, should I be included in that count or should I not? And so let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to go ahead and navigate to one of these task records. I'm going to go ahead and edit the layout so I can add a formula field. And I'm going to add a new formula field. And I'm going to call this formula field it's going to be very literal, but I'm going to say is incidental and is in progress. That's one we'll start with. And I'm actually going to make this more like a variable name, just shorter, easier to deal with in the formula. And then I'm going to make my output type a list. And then I'm going to just use kind of Boolean values. I'm just going to say false and true. Kind of make it simple. And then here, my formula is going to be relatively simple because I'm going to use this field. I'm going to allow the task records to use this formula calculation to determine if a particular task record has meets those two criteria. Is it incidental and is it in progress? So I'll have an if statement that does exactly that. So an if statement that just checks and sees, hey, is the status, well, actually, let's do the type first because that's how I wrote the field name. So let's do the type. So is the type incidental and is the status equal to in progress? And if that is the case, if both those things are true, then we're going to have this field return true. And then the default case is if neither of those things are true, we're just going to return false. Right? So now the task records themselves have a formula field that they can use to identify themselves individually as whether or not they should be included in that count at the parent record, right? If this task is related to a particular parent, then the task can inform the parent that, hey, I am incidental and I am in progress and I should be included in that count at that parent level. So I'm going to go ahead and save this formula field now. I'm going to drag it on layout just real quick so we can see it. And for this particular record, this value should be true, right? Because its type is incidental and its status is in progress. But let's go back to the parent project record and let's get a look at this for all of our related task records. So I'm going to go ahead and edit my layout here. And I'm going to modify this parallel reference that holds all my task records. And I'm actually going to put in the grid here that new formula we just created just so I can see it from the parent. I can see all the values for all those related task records. So I'm going to go ahead and save and close. And then I'll give this a refresh. And so now I've got that formula field that I was talking about. I've got that formula field where I can see all the values for each of those related task records. So task 3 has identified itself as being in progress and incidental, but the other 2 task records have not, right? Because they are coordinated and complete, and the other one is in progress and planned. So now what I can do is I can use that single field that we made at the child level, right? This child level, I can use that field to determine my count for the in progress incidental task formula field. And I can use that CountIf function. I can have the CountIf function look at those task records and say, hey, is that new formula field, the is incidental and is in progress field, is that true? Then I want to count it. If it's not true, I don't want to count it. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's open up this layout. Let's click Edit Layout. And let's modify that formula. And let's actually implement the formula. So we are going to do the CountIf function. And I always like to pick the function through the function dropdown. And the reason for that is that sometimes if I can't remember what exactly the parameters are that I should be passing to the function, Onspring will just tell me. So I'll just go ahead and click CountIf. And so now I know, okay, I need to give it the reference condition. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my task records. And then for each task record, I'm going to look at that new formula that we made, the is incidental and is in progress formula field. And I'm going to check to see, is that true? And then if it's true, I'm going to count that task record's record ID. So let's go ahead and save that. Oh, should be record ID, not just record. Save. Okay, and now when I go back to my project record and I refresh it, I should see this in progress task incidental field is now returning the correct count, 1. Right? And that count is based on multiple criteria. It's based on both the status of the task and the type of the task. But I'm at the parent just using the CountIf function again, right? The criteria, the multiple criteria, is defined at the child. I'm sort of allowing the child to identify itself in this case. And again, this if you come from spreadsheets, you may be instantly reaching for CountIfs and SumIfs functions, but you can accomplish the same thing in Onspring doing it like this. And so to do this for all the other different types of tasks and all the other different statuses, I would just rinse and repeat the same thing. Create a field at the child that identifies whether that child is in a particular group, and then base my count at the parent by looking at that particular child formula field. So I hope this is helpful. I hope this gives you a different way to look at the problem and hopefully makes your life as an admin a little bit easier in the future. And of course, if you have any questions, please leave a comment. I'll be happy to answer them. And if there's anything else I can help you with, let me know.